Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a world where a royal dinner wasn't simply about satisfying hunger, it was a carefully staged performance of wealth, power, romance, and sometimes pure superstition. So, before you settle in, take a moment to like the video. If you enjoy relaxing history, documentaries, subscribe if you're new here, and let me know down in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a blanket, and let's slowly wander into the kitchens of the ancient world. Imagine ruling an empire stretching across deserts, rivers, and mountains. You command armies of thousands. You own palaces filled with marble and gold. Servants rush at every gesture. Musicians play as you eat. Yet somehow, you're still worried about whether tonight's dinner might impress your latest queen. History has a funny way of reminding us that absolute power doesn't solve ordinary problems. Ancient kings spent astonishing fortunes searching for foods they believed could increase strength, preserve youth, improve fertility, inspire affection, or simply convince everyone watching that they had been personally blessed by the gods. Some meals were genuinely delicious, others were surprisingly healthy, and a few were, well, the culinary equivalent of taking advice from that one friend who's confidently wrong about absolutely everything. Tonight, we'll visit the courts of Egypt, Persia, China, India, Greece, and Rome. We'll discover exotic spices worth more than silver, honey sweeter than modern desserts, fish transported hundreds of miles before anyone had invented refrigeration, which somehow seemed like an excellent idea. We'll meet rulers convinced that rare herbs extended life, emperors who believed particular mushrooms carried divine energy, kings who imported cinnamon from lands they couldn't even find on a map, and monarchs who quietly ate ordinary bread after everyone else had gone home, because even royal banquets eventually become exhausting. Despite the legends, we'll also separate historical evidence from later myths. Not every extravagant feast actually happened. Not every mysterious potion created miraculous romance. Sometimes a king simply enjoyed roasted lamb and a good glass of wine, which, honestly, is probably healthier than swallowing powdered gemstones, because someone claimed it would make you irresistible. As always, this is a slow journey. No battles every 5 minutes, no dramatic shouting, just quiet history, curious traditions, and a gentle walk through some of history's most fascinating royal kitchens. So, settle in, take a slow breath, and let's begin where one of history's oldest civilizations believed that the road to both political power and perhaps even love passed directly through the royal dining table. Part 1. The Pharaoh's Table, Egypt's royal banquets, long before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, before medieval castles, before Europe's famous royal courts. Egyptian pharaohs were already hosting banquets that looked almost unreal. The Nile flooded every year with remarkable reliability, creating rich farmland capable of feeding millions. That dependable river transformed Egypt into one of history's earliest food superpowers. For ordinary farmers, daily meals were fairly simple: bread, beer, onions, beans, sometimes fish, occasionally dates or figs. Perfectly respectable food, although perhaps not the sort of menu you'd use to impress 30 royal spouses. Pharaohs, naturally, lived in an entirely different culinary universe. Royal kitchens employed hundreds of workers. Some baked bread, others brewed beer. Specialists butchered cattle. Teams cleaned fish arriving directly from the Nile. Gardeners cultivated herbs throughout palace grounds. Even preparing breakfast required what today might qualify as a medium-sized corporation. Royal tables displayed enormous roasted geese with crispy skin, tender ducks seasoned with coriander, fresh vegetables arranged into colorful displays, sweet figs, grapes, melons, pomegranates, almonds, pistachios, fragrant honey cakes, soft cheeses, and freshly baked loaves shaped into elaborate designs. It wasn't simply dinner. It was political theater, served on gold plates. Every guest understood the message. The gods favored the pharaoh. The Nile favored the pharaoh. Prosperity favored the pharaoh. And perhaps, after enough wine, everyone else favored the pharaoh too. Egyptian queens often participated in lavish ceremonial feasts, honoring religious festivals, diplomatic marriages, and successful harvests. Food reinforced family alliances as much as romance. Modern stories sometimes exaggerate the seductive purpose of these banquets, but historians agree they played an important role in displaying abundance, generosity, and royal legitimacy. After all, it's easier to admire a ruler whose table never seems empty, even if someone else did all the cooking. Part 2. Persia, Exotic Spices, and Royal Feasts. Welcome back. Our journey now carries us away from the fertile banks of the Nile and into another extraordinary empire, one so vast that ancient writers struggled to describe its size without sounding like they were exaggerating. Tonight, we're visiting ancient Persia, an empire where royal roads stretched farther than most people could imagine, where messengers crossed mountains and deserts carrying the king's commands, and where a single banquet could quietly demonstrate the wealth of half the known world. So settle in once more. There's no rush. The palace kitchens are already awake. Imagine approaching the ceremonial city of Persepolis around 500 years before the birth of Christ. The morning sun slowly climbs over rugged mountains, casting long golden shadows across towering stone staircases carved with endless processions of nobles, soldiers, and tribute bearers. The palace seems almost unreal. Massive columns rise like forests of polished stone. Walls gleam with colorful glazed bricks. Gold decorations catch the first light of dawn, somewhere deep inside, long before the king appears. Another kingdom has already come to life, the royal kitchens. Because feeding the King of Kings wasn't something you left until the last minute. Unlike Egypt, whose wealth flowed predictably from the Nile, Persia ruled over an astonishing collection of different lands. Each province offered something unique. Babylonia supplied grain. Media sent horses. Phoenicia delivered cedar wood. The mountains provided walnuts and pistachios. The southern coast offered dates. Far eastern provinces contributed precious spices. The empire itself became one enormous pantry. Imagine owning a grocery store that stretched from the Mediterranean almost to India. Inventory management must have been interesting. Every morning, servants entered storerooms packed with ingredients from distant provinces. Large clay jars overflowed with wheat, Fresh fruits rested in woven baskets. Olive oil shimmered inside carefully sealed containers. Bundles of herbs hung drying from wooden beams. Sacks of cumin, coriander, dill, fennel, and sesame waited patiently beside fragrant cinnamon and cassia that had traveled incredible distances before reaching the royal court. These spices were worth fortunes, not because they simply tasted pleasant, but because obtaining them required caravans crossing deserts, merchants negotiating dangerous routes, and countless hands moving goods across thousands of miles. Every pinch of cinnamon represented an international supply chain, ancient globalization, minus the shipping notifications. Royal cooks understood something important. A feast wasn't merely about satisfying hunger. It was diplomacy served on silver platters. When ambassadors from Egypt, Lydia, or distant Greek cities entered the banquet hall, every dish quietly communicated the same message. Persia possesses everything, everything, from every corner of the world. The banquet hall itself inspired awe. Immense wooden tables stretched beneath soaring ceilings. Fine carpets softened every footstep. Bronze braziers filled the air with warm fragrance. Musicians gently played harps, flutes, and drums, while servants moved almost silently between guests. No one shouted, no one hurried. Everything unfolded with calm precision. Centuries before, luxury hotels perfected attentive service. Persian palace staff had already mastered the art of appearing exactly when needed and disappearing just as quickly. The first courses often included fresh flatbreads still warm from clay ovens. These breads accompanied soft cheeses flavored with herbs, bowls of olives, creamy yogurt, walnuts, almonds, pistachios, figs, dates, pomegranates, grapes, cucumbers, and fragrant fresh mint. Even before the meat arrived, guests enjoyed a table overflowing with colors and textures. Simple ingredients, prepared beautifully. Sometimes, history's greatest luxury isn't complexity, it's abundance. Then came the meats. Roasted lamb, slowly cooked over glowing coals. Tender kid goat, seasoned with coriander. Venison from royal hunting preserves. Duck glazed with fruit syrups. Game birds stuffed with herbs and nuts. Large cuts of beef, roasted until wonderfully tender. Many recipes balanced sweet and savory flavors. Honey mixed with vinegar. Pomegranate reduced into rich sauces. Dried fruits combined with meat. To modern diners, some combinations might seem unusual. Then again, people today willingly put pineapple on pizza. History politely declines to judge. One ingredient appeared again and again: saffron. Those delicate crimson threads required extraordinary labor to harvest. Each flower produced only 3 tiny stigmas. Thousands upon thousands of blossoms had to be picked by hand. No machines, no shortcuts, just patient workers, gathering tiny threads beneath the morning sun. Even today, saffron remains one of the world's most valuable spices. Apparently, some luxuries simply refuse to go out of fashion. Wine flowed generously during many royal celebrations. Persia produced excellent vineyards, especially in regions with mild climates. Later, after witnessing immense suffering, he embraced Buddhism and dramatically transformed his approach to leadership. His inscriptions describe concern for both human and animal welfare. Hospitals appeared, Shade trees lined roads. Medicinal herbs were cultivated, while palace kitchens certainly continued preparing luxurious meals. Ashoka's later philosophy encouraged moderation, compassion, and thoughtful living. Even an emperor could change. History reminds us that power does not always move in only one direction. Royal banquets still displayed extraordinary abundance. Golden platters carried roasted meats for those who ate them. Fresh fruits overflowed from carved bowls. Mangoes, bananas, pomegranates, grapes, coconuts, jackfruit, sweet melons, seasonal delicacies varied across the immense subcontinent, ensuring that each region contributed something unique to the king's table. Nature itself became part of the celebration. Milk products held special importance. Fresh yogurt cooled the body during hot weather. Soft cheeses appeared in various forms. Clarified butter enriched countless recipes. Creamy desserts sweetened with honey delighted guests at festivals. Before refined sugar became widespread, sweetness often arrived through honey, dates, palm sap, or naturally ripe fruits. Perhaps desserts tasted a little different, but no less satisfying. One beverage especially appreciated among nobles consisted of cooled water infused with fragrant herbs, flowers, or fruits, rose petals, vetiver roots, mint.sandalwood. These refreshing drinks offered relief beneath India's intense summer heat. Modern air conditioning would have been appreciated, but scented water made a respectable substitute. Meals followed careful etiquette. Guests washed their hands before eating. Food was often served in a thoughtful sequence. Many people traditionally ate using the fingers of the right hand, believing that touch formed part of the dining experience. To outsiders, this sometimes seemed unusual. To those raised within the culture, it felt perfectly natural. Different civilizations develop different customs. None seem strange until viewed from somewhere else. Royal physicians frequently recommended moderation. Overeating clouded the mind. Heavy meals reduced energy. Balance mattered more than excess. An effective king needed clear judgment, physical endurance, emotional stability, and patience. Food supported all four. The palace kitchen therefore became almost an extension of the royal medical clinic, although undoubtedly with much better aromas. Festivals transformed everyday meals into magnificent celebrations. Musicians filled palace halls with gentle melodies. Poets recited verses praising gods and kings. Dancers performed graceful movements beneath flickering oil lamps. Servants moved gracefully among honored guests, carrying silver trays piled high with fragrant dishes. Every color seemed brighter. Every spice smelled richer. Every conversation unfolded just a little more slowly. For a few precious hours, the worries of governing an empire faded beneath the warmth of shared hospitality. Of course, not every belief about food proved scientifically accurate. Some ingredients acquired legendary reputations as miraculous restoratives or symbols of eternal youth. Others were believed to strengthen courage or deepen wisdom. Modern medicine might politely question a few of those claims. Still, the broader emphasis on fresh ingredients, moderation, seasonal eating, and variety appears remarkably sensible even today. Sometimes, ancient civilizations stumbled upon lasting wisdom without laboratories. Only careful observation passed down through generations. As night gradually settled across the palace gardens, the last guests slowly departed. Oil lamps flickered beside quiet pools where lotus flowers floated peacefully beneath the moonlight. The musicians packed away their instruments. The cooks cleaned enormous copper pots that would begin bubbling again before sunrise. Somewhere in the palace, the king prepared for another day of judgments, ceremonies, and difficult decisions. His banquet had ended. His responsibilities had not. Perhaps that explains why ancient Indian physicians believed good food mattered so deeply, not because it promised immortality, not because it guaranteed happiness, but because even the most powerful ruler still needed strength, clarity, patience, and balance to greet tomorrow. And tomorrow, as always, would arrive with the rising sun. Our next peaceful stop takes us farther east still, into the vast imperial courts of ancient China, where emperors searched tirelessly for the perfect diet to grant not only health and wisdom, but, according to legend, perhaps even eternal life. Part 4. China, Imperial Longevity. Diets welcome back. Tonight, our quiet journey carries us farther east, beyond towering mountain ranges and vast deserts, until we arrive in one of history's oldest continuous civilizations, ancient China, a land where emperors ruled beneath the mandate of heaven, where scholars debated philosophy for decades, where court officials recorded almost everything in remarkable detail, and where one simple question echoed through countless imperial palaces: how can an emperor live just a little longer? It is, perhaps, the most human question imaginable, because no matter how many armies obeyed an emperor, no matter how magnificent his palace became, no matter how many servants bowed as he passed, he still couldn't negotiate with time. History has always been stubborn that way. Imagine the Forbidden City. Well, not quite yet. We're traveling to an earlier imperial palace during the Han Dynasty, nearly 2,000 years ago. Morning sunlight filters through painted wooden halls. Red lacquer columns glow softly beneath golden roofs. Garden ponds mirror willow trees swaying gently in the breeze. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, thousands of officials have already begun another busy day, governing one of the largest empires on Earth. Inside the palace kitchens, however, another important task is already underway: preparing breakfast for the Son of Heaven. Unlike many royal courts, where food served mainly as a display of wealth, Chinese imperial cuisine carried another responsibility. Every ingredient possessed a purpose, not merely flavor, balance, health, longevity. The emperor's meals were expected to strengthen the body, calm the mind, and preserve harmony between the natural forces believed to shape human life. Because an unhealthy emperor meant political uncertainty, and uncertainty had an unfortunate habit of spreading faster than good news. Court physicians worked closely with imperial cooks. Much like the Ayurvedic traditions we encountered in ancient India, Chinese medicine viewed food as an essential part of maintaining health. Meals changed with the seasons. Different ingredients suited different climates. Some foods warmed the body, others cooled it. Certain herbs restored energy, others encouraged restful sleep. The palace kitchen often resembled a medical laboratory, only considerably more delicious. Rice remained the foundation of many imperial meals, especially in southern regions. In northern China, however, wheat often appeared instead. Steamed buns, fresh noodles, thin pancakes, soft dumplings, each reflected local agriculture and centuries of culinary tradition. Simple staples supported elaborate side dishes prepared with astonishing care. Sometimes, history reminds us that luxury doesn't replace the basics, it simply improves them. Fresh vegetables covered imperial tables. Chinese cabbage, bok choy, lotus root, bamboo shoots, radishes, scallions, mushrooms gathered from distant forests. Many vegetables still familiar today already played important roles in Chinese kitchens thousands of years ago. The cooks prized freshness above nearly everything else. After all, without refrigerators, freshness wasn't merely fashionable, it was survival. Fish occupied a place of special honor. Carp, perch, catfish, freshwater, fish from rivers and lakes, seafood from distant coastal provinces. Fish symbolized prosperity and abundance, served whole, beautifully arranged. They represented completeness and good fortune. Besides, if your empire stretches from mountains to oceans, it seems only polite to enjoy both. Tea gradually became one of China's greatest gifts to the world, although its role evolved over centuries. By later imperial periods, tea had become deeply woven into court life. Servants carefully prepared delicate leaves, using water heated to just the right temperature. Conversations slowed. Officials reflected. Scholars debated poetry. The emperor sometimes received specially selected harvests unavailable to anyone else. Some traditions measured wealth in gold. China occasionally measured refinement in tea leaves. Then came the herbs. This is where the imperial search for longevity truly begins. Court physicians prescribed countless botanical ingredients believed to strengthen health. Ginseng stood among the most prized. Its oddly human-shaped roots inspired generations of legends. Many believed it restored vitality, increased endurance, sharpened the mind, and prolonged life. Even today, ginseng remains one of East Asia's most respected traditional herbs. Ancient emperors valued it so highly that special expeditions ventured into remote mountains, searching for wild specimens. Finding one could change a family's fortunes forever. Another treasured ingredient was goji berry, small bright red, pleasantly sweet. Traditional medicine praised it for supporting health and preserving youthful energy. Modern nutrition often highlights its vitamins and antioxidants. Ancient physicians simply smiled knowingly and continued adding it to soups. Sometimes old traditions survive because they happen to work reasonably well. Medicinal soups became central to imperial dining. Chicken slowly simmered with herbs. Duck prepared with warming spices. Bone broths enriched over many hours. Mushrooms, large ceramic vessels, stored wines for important ceremonies. Although later, Persian empires embraced different religious traditions, during the Achaemenid period, wine occupied an important place at courtly banquets. Servants carefully filled elegant, drinking vessels, while musicians continued their gentle melodies. The atmosphere encouraged conversation rather than chaos. Well, usually, Too much wine has been ruining political discussions for several thousand years. Human consistency can be strangely comforting. Perhaps no ruler embodied Persian magnificence more than Darius the Great. Under his reign, roads expanded, canals connected distant waters, taxes organized the empire, and trade flourished. His court reflected that administrative brilliance. Everything possessed order, even dinner. Records preserved on clay tablets reveal carefully managed distributions of grain, wine, livestock, and supplies. Royal feasts looked effortless. Behind the scenes stood an astonishing bureaucracy. Someone had to count every sheep. Someone had to record every barrel of wine. Someone almost certainly argued about inventory. Empires, it turns out, run on paperwork nearly as much as they run on armies. His son, Xerxes IV, inherited not only an immense empire, but also its legendary reputation for luxury. Greek writers, especially Herodotus, delighted in describing Persian extravagance. Some accounts almost certainly exaggerated for dramatic effect. Ancient historians occasionally enjoyed sensational storytelling every bit as much as modern documentaries. Imagine that. Still, archaeological discoveries confirm that Persian courts truly possessed extraordinary wealth. Gold vessels, silver plates, imported ivory, rare woods, beautiful textiles, magnificent gardens. Their reputation wasn't invented, only occasionally embellished. Gardens played an unexpected role in Persian dining. The Persians loved carefully designed green spaces filled with flowing water, shade trees, fragrant flowers, and fruit orchards. In fact, our modern word paradise ultimately traces back to an old Persian term describing enclosed royal gardens. Imagine enjoying fresh figs while fountains quietly murmured nearby beneath towering cypress trees. Honestly, that sounds rather pleasant. No surprise the word eventually became associated with heaven itself. Royal women also participated in court life far more actively than many older stereotypes suggest. Queens supervised estates, owned property, managed servants, and occasionally sponsored religious or charitable works. At important festivals, royal women attended ceremonial banquets that reinforced family unity and political legitimacy. Marriage remained deeply connected to statecraft. A shared banquet wasn't merely romantic. It reminded everyone watching that the royal household stood united, whether everyone actually agreed with one another. Behind closed doors, history leaves politely unanswered. Families rarely become less complicated simply because they wear crowns. Persian desserts reflected remarkable sophistication. Honey-sweetened pastries filled with chopped dates, crushed pistachios, walnuts, almonds, sesame, and fragrant herbs. Fresh fruits concluded many meals. Pomegranates held special symbolic significance, representing abundance and fertility. Even today, they remain central to many traditions across the region. Some customs endure because they're beautiful, others because they're delicious, sometimes both. Not every meal resembled a grand festival. Even kings occasionally ate simpler foods: fresh bread, cheese, fruit, roasted meat, yogurt, herbs. Daily life inside the palace required practicality alongside ceremony. The greatest feasts marked religious festivals, diplomatic visits, military victories, royal marriages, and New Year celebrations. Extraordinary occasions deserved extraordinary tables. On ordinary mornings, even emperors sometimes preferred a quieter breakfast. As evening settled over Persepolis, oil lamps flickered beneath towering columns, while conversations gradually softened. Musicians played slower melodies. Servants quietly removed silver platters, now empty except for scattered crumbs and fragrant herbs. Outside the palace, stars slowly appeared above the Persian mountains, exactly as they had for countless generations. The banquet ended, but its purpose had already been fulfilled. Foreign ambassadors returned home impressed. Nobles witnessed the empire's prosperity. The king demonstrated his power without raising a sword. Sometimes, a perfectly prepared dinner could accomplish what armies never could. And as the final lamps dimmed within the palace, the scent of saffron, roasted lamb, warm bread, and sweet pomegranates lingered gently in the evening air. Tomorrow, the kitchens would awaken before sunrise once again, because ruling the greatest empire of its age required many talents. Apparently, excellent catering was one of them. Our next quiet journey will take us even farther east, into the royal courts of ancient India, where physicians, philosophers, and kings believed that food wasn't merely nourishment, it was medicine, balance, and the foundation of a long and prosperous life. Part 3. Ancient India. Ayurvedic Foods for Kings. Welcome back. Tonight, our slow journey carries us eastward across towering mountains, winding rivers, and ancient trade routes into one of the world's oldest civilizations. We're arriving in ancient India, a land where food wasn't simply something you ate. It was something you understood, something you respected, sometimes something you prescribed. Long before modern nutritionists began debating carbohydrates over breakfast television, Indian physicians had already spent centuries discussing how different foods affected the body, the mind, and even the emotions. And if you happened to be a king, your dinner wasn't chosen only because it tasted good. It was expected to help you rule an empire. No pressure for the palace chef. Imagine entering the royal kitchens of the Mauryan Empire around the 3rd century before Christ. Outside, the palace buzzes with officials, soldiers, merchants, scholars, and ambassadors from distant kingdoms. Inside the kitchens, however, another kind of order reigns. Large copper pots gently simmer over wood fires. Fresh herbs lie neatly arranged on woven mats. Stone grinders rhythmically crush fragrant spices into fine powders. Steam rises softly into the warm morning air. The atmosphere feels surprisingly peaceful. Busy, but peaceful. The cooks move with practiced confidence, each knowing exactly what must be prepared before the king appears. Unlike many other royal courts, ancient Indian cuisine often reflected a fascinating balance between luxury and health. The guiding philosophy came from Ayurveda, an ancient system of medicine whose name literally means the knowledge of life. According to Ayurvedic teachings, every person possessed a unique balance of energies, and food played an essential role in maintaining that balance. A wise king was expected to nourish not only his appetite, but also his body, his mind, and his judgment, because an exhausted ruler made poor decisions, and history already had plenty of those. No need to create more. The royal physicians worked closely with palace cooks. Imagine having your personal doctor approve tonight's dinner before it even reached your table. Some mornings, the physician might recommend lighter meals during hot weather. Other days, richer dishes helped restore strength after military campaigns or long religious ceremonies. Meals changed with the seasons. Summer demanded cooling foods. Winter encouraged warming spices. Even the time of day influenced what appeared on the royal table. It was less about strict rules and more about harmony. Rice occupied a place of honor throughout much of ancient India. Freshly steamed, fragrant, and remarkably versatile, it accompanied nearly every important meal. Different regions produced different varieties, each suited to local climates and traditions. Some rice remained plain, others were gently flavored with clarified butter, known today as ghee, or delicately scented with herbs. Simple, comforting, timeless. Sometimes the greatest luxury is perfectly cooked rice. Anyone who has accidentally burned a pot knows exactly how impressive that can be. Alongside rice came lentils, prepared in countless ways. Slowly simmered until soft, seasoned with cumin, brightened with ginger, finished with fragrant coriander leaves. Rich in nourishment and surprisingly satisfying, lentils provided strength without unnecessary extravagance. Kings enjoyed them, farmers enjoyed them, monks enjoyed them. When nearly everyone appreciates the same food, you've probably discovered something worth keeping. The royal kitchens overflowed with spices, not because cooks wished to overwhelm every dish with intense flavor. Quite the opposite. Each spice possessed a purpose. Turmeric added warm color, while also being valued for its medicinal qualities. Black pepper, native to India's southwestern coast, offered gentle heat. Cardamom filled the air with sweet fragrance. Cinnamon added comforting warmth. Cloves contributed depth. Cumin grounded many dishes with its earthy aroma. Fresh ginger brightened countless recipes. Today, these spices sit quietly inside supermarket shelves. 2,000 years ago, some were worth traveling across oceans to obtain. Foreign merchants certainly noticed. Greek traders, Arab sailors, Persian caravans. Later, Roman merchants, all eagerly sought Indian spices. Entire trade networks developed around tiny packets of fragrant seeds and bark. Ships crossed dangerous seas. Caravans crossed scorching deserts. Fortunes changed hands. Wars were eventually influenced by the spice trade, all because someone discovered food tasted better with a little cardamom. History occasionally has an excellent sense of irony. Among the most fascinating rulers of ancient India was Emperor Ashoka. Early in his reign, he conquered through war. Other times, merchants hurried toward the camp, hoping to sell grain, fruit, cheese, wine, and livestock to eager buyers. Wherever thousands of soldiers gathered, temporary economies quickly appeared. Apparently, entrepreneurs have always known where customers can be found. Perhaps Alexander's most famous banquet occurred at Susa in 324 BC. This was no ordinary celebration. It became one of history's largest royal weddings. Alexander himself married Statera Su, daughter of the defeated Persian king Darius III. At the same ceremony, around 80 of his senior officers also married Persian noblewomen. The event symbolized Alexander's dream of uniting Macedonians and Persians into one empire rather than ruling them separately. Politics, diplomacy, marriage, food, music, everything blended into one extraordinary spectacle. Imagine organizing seating arrangements for that guest list. Even experienced wedding planners might politely decline. Ancient writers describe enormous quantities of food and wine flowing throughout the celebration. Musicians performed continuously. Dancers entertained distinguished guests. Golden cups sparkled beneath countless oil lamps. Perfumed incense drifted through richly decorated halls. Thousands celebrated beneath colorful fabrics suspended overhead. The feast represented far more than personal happiness. It announced a new vision for the empire. Whether everyone accepted that vision, history remains less certain. Alexander admired heroic ideals inherited from Homer. The Iliad accompanied him throughout many campaigns. Banquets frequently included poetry, celebrating Achilles and other legendary warriors. Musicians played familiar melodies. Storytellers entertained tired soldiers with tales of gods and heroes. Even after exhausting marches, people still found comfort in familiar stories. Perhaps that has never changed. After all, here we are, thousands of years later, still telling them. Not every evening proved joyful. Campaign life remained brutally difficult. Long marches across deserts left soldiers thirsty. Mountain crossings exhausted men and animals alike. Food sometimes grew scarce. Grain spoiled. Supply wagons disappeared. Unexpected weather delayed provisions. There were evenings when even Alexander could offer little more than encouragement and shared hardship. History often remembers glorious victories. It less frequently remembers hungry nights. Alexander's relationship with wine also deserves mention. Greek symposium traditions naturally influenced his court. Ancient sources occasionally describe drinking contests among officers. Some celebrations became remarkably extravagant. Unfortunately, excessive drinking sometimes ended badly. One famous tragedy involved the death of Clitus the Black, one of Alexander's oldest companions. During a heated banquet, after too much wine and an increasingly bitter argument, Alexander killed Clitus in a moment of uncontrolled anger. When his fury subsided, he reportedly fell into profound grief and regret. It became one of the darkest moments of his life, a painful reminder that even the greatest conquerors remained deeply human. Power could command armies. It could not always command emotion. As Alexander marched farther east, reaching the rivers of India, entirely new foods entered his experience. Rice appeared more frequently. Sugarcane fascinated Greek observers. Exotic fruits unknown in Macedonia found their way into royal meals. New spices filled palace kitchens with unfamiliar aromas. Each conquest expanded not only his empire, but also his palate. History's trade routes often followed behind its armies. Yet despite unimaginable victories, Alexander never truly enjoyed lasting peace. He spent most of his adult life on campaign. Cities rose behind him. Battles awaited ahead. Maps constantly changed. Home grew increasingly distant. Perhaps that explains why ancient writers sometimes describe him eating quickly, preparing for tomorrow's march before today's meal had fully ended. Even magnificent banquets eventually gave way to another sunrise, another road, another conquest. In 323 BC, Alexander died unexpectedly in Babylon at only 32 years of age. His empire survived him only briefly before dividing among rival generals. The enormous banquet halls eventually fell silent. The campaign camps disappeared into history. The soldiers returned home, or never did. But something remarkable endured. Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Asian culinary traditions had already begun blending together. Trade routes expanded, ideas traveled, recipes crossed borders. Long after Alexander's empire fractured, the exchange of cultures continued. Perhaps that became his most lasting feast, not one served upon golden tables, but one shared across continents. As night settles over the quiet military camp, the last cooking fires slowly fade into glowing embers. The soldiers wrap themselves in worn cloaks beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Some dream of home, others dream of tomorrow's victory. Alexander studies another map by flickering lamplight, already planning the next impossible journey. The aroma of roasted lamb, warm bread, wood smoke, and distant campfires drifts gently through the cool night air. For a few peaceful hours, even the greatest army in history finally rests. Tomorrow, the march begins again, and our own journey now follows the path westward toward another civilization that perfected the art of extravagant dining. Our next stop is ancient Rome, where emperors transformed dinner into a display of power so lavish that some banquets became almost unbelievable, and occasionally almost impossible to survive. Part 7. Rome, Emperors, Oysters, and Honeyed Wine. Welcome back. Tonight, our gentle journey brings us to a civilization that admired Greek philosophy, borrowed Egyptian grain, imported Persian spices, traded with India, and somehow still managed to convince itself that it had invented luxury. Welcome to ancient Rome, a city where nearly 1 million people crowded into narrow streets, where aqueducts carried fresh water across valleys, where senators debated beneath marble ceilings, and where the emperor's dinner table became one of the most powerful stages in the entire empire. Because in Rome, a banquet wasn't simply a meal. It was an announcement. An emperor didn't merely eat. He performed. Imagine approaching the Palatine Hill during the reign of Emperor Augustus. Below, you stretches the noisy city of Rome. Merchants shout from crowded markets. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron. Children race through winding alleyways. Temple bells echo softly across the forum. The scent of fresh bread mixes with olive oil, wood smoke, and sea air drifting inland from the Mediterranean. Above it all rises the imperial palace. Its marble walls gleam beneath the afternoon sun. Somewhere inside, hundreds of servants are already preparing tonight's feast. The imperial kitchens resemble a small city. Cooks hurry between enormous bronze cauldrons. Bakers remove fresh loaves from stone ovens. Butchers prepare cuts of pork, lamb, and beef. Fishmongers clean oysters, packed in damp seaweed to keep them fresh during their journey to Rome. Wine stewards inspect ceramic amphorae, stacked carefully in cool storage rooms. Every worker knows their task. Every mistake carries consequences. When preparing dinner for the ruler of the Mediterranean world, burning the roast is generally discouraged. Rome possessed one remarkable advantage. Its empire stretched across 3 continents. Grain arrived from Egypt, olive oil from Hispania, wine from Gaul, spices from Arabia and India, fish sauce from southern Spain, marble from Greece, dates from North Africa. Almost every province contributed something to the emperor's table. The Roman Empire functioned like one enormous marketplace connected by roads and ships. All roads may have led to Rome, but apparently so did dinner. Among the Romans' greatest delicacies were oysters. Fresh oysters became symbols of wealth and refinement. Special containers filled with damp seaweed helped transport them inland while keeping them alive. The wealthiest Romans believed oysters from particular coastal regions tasted superior. Some preferences never disappear. Even today, people happily debate which oyster is finest. History quietly smiles. Fish occupied a place of honor throughout Roman cuisine. Sea bass, mullet, tuna, eels, octopus, squid, freshwater fish from rivers throughout the empire. But perhaps no Roman ingredient became more famous or infamous than garum. Garum was a fermented fish sauce prepared by layering fish, salt, and thyme together inside large containers beneath the Mediterranean sun. The resulting liquid became one of Rome's favorite seasonings. It flavored vegetables, meat, fish, stews, eggs, almost everything. Modern descriptions often make garum sound alarming. Apparently, fermented fish sauce, left outdoors for weeks, doesn't immediately inspire culinary confidence. Yet historians believe it added a rich, savory flavor remarkably similar to modern Asian fish sauces. Perhaps the Romans knew exactly what they were doing, even if explaining the recipe sounds challenging. Bread remained the foundation of nearly every Roman meal. White bread appeared on aristocratic tables. Darker loaves nourished ordinary citizens. Thousands of bakeries operated throughout Rome. The aroma of freshly baked bread drifted through city streets every morning. Some comforts prove universal across civilizations. Warm bread has been making people happy for thousands of years. Wine accompanied almost every banquet. Like the Greeks before them, Romans usually diluted wine with water. Some wines were flavored with herbs, flowers, spices, or even seawater. One especially popular luxury was honeyed wine, often called mulsum. Fresh honey softened the wine's natural sharpness while adding delicate sweetness. Served before meals, it welcomed guests into the evening celebration. Considering humanity's long affection for honey, this idea seems rather sensible. Dinner itself unfolded in carefully planned stages. Greek honey developed such an excellent reputation that merchants carried it across the Mediterranean. Even today, Greek honey remains highly prized. The bees, fortunately, continue working without concern for historical recognition. One famous delicacy involved stuffed grape leaves filled with grains, herbs, and occasionally meat. Fresh herbs such as thyme, mint, dill, and oregano filled the air with fragrance. Cheeses varied by region. Fresh fruits concluded many meals. Simple ingredients transformed through careful preparation. Perhaps that explains why Mediterranean cuisine continues inspiring cooks. Thousands of years later, good ideas tend to survive, especially delicious ones. Among the symposium's most famous participants stood Socrates. Ancient writers often described him attending banquets while astonishing everyone around him, not because he consumed enormous quantities of food. Quite the opposite. His remarkable self-control became legendary. He could reportedly drink considerable amounts of wine without becoming noticeably intoxicated. Whether entirely accurate or slightly exaggerated by admiring students remains uncertain. Ancient biographies occasionally enjoyed polishing reputations. Still, the image fits the philosopher well. While others gradually became louder, Socrates apparently became more thoughtful, an unusual talent at any dinner party. Then there was Plato, whose famous dialogue symposium immortalized one such gathering. The work presents guests discussing the nature of love, beauty, and human desire while reclining together after dinner. Of course, Plato shaped the conversation into philosophical literature rather than a literal transcript. Even so, it offers a fascinating glimpse into the atmosphere these evenings could create. Food nourished the body. Conversation nourished the mind. Both mattered. Music gently accompanied many symposiums. Young women played the lyre. Flutes echoed softly across the room. Poets recited verses from Homer. Guests occasionally sang together. Others challenged one another with riddles or improvised poetry. Not every evening revolved around politics. Sometimes people simply enjoyed each other's company. History deserves to remember that as well. Games appeared too. One particularly curious pastime called korobos required players to flick the final drops of wine from their cups toward small targets. The goal involved accuracy rather than making the biggest possible mess. Although one imagines servants occasionally questioned whether the distinction mattered very much. Fortunately, cleaning crews have always been among history's unsung heroes. Hospitality occupied a sacred place in Greek culture. The concept of xenia, or guest friendship, carried enormous importance. Hosts treated visitors generously. Guests behaved respectfully. Both believed the gods watched these interactions closely. According to mythology, Zeus himself protected travelers and strangers. Ignoring a guest risked offending the king of the gods, an uncomfortable possibility, especially if thunderstorms suddenly appeared overhead. Of course, not every symposium produced timeless philosophical insight. Some undoubtedly ended with heated arguments about politics. Others featured overly ambitious poetry. Someone probably insisted his hometown produced better olives than everyone else's. Another guest almost certainly disagreed. Human nature has remarkable consistency across 25 centuries. Only the clothing changes. Outside wealthy homes, ordinary Greeks lived far more modestly. Farmers worked rocky fields. Fishermen repaired nets. Potters shaped clay. Their meals centered on bread, olives, onions, beans, fish when available, and seasonal vegetables. Royal extravagance existed elsewhere. Greek society often admired moderation. Even aristocrats generally preferred elegance over overwhelming excess. Luxury whispered. It rarely shouted. As the night deepened over Athens, the symposium gradually drew to a close. Oil lamps burned lower. The musicians packed away their instruments. Guests slowly rose from their couches, still discussing philosophy, politics, poetry, and perhaps quietly wondering whether Socrates had just won another argument without anyone noticing exactly how. Outside, moonlight bathed the marble temples of the Acropolis in soft silver. The city grew peaceful. Tomorrow, merchants would reopen their shops. Philosophers would return to the agora. Students would gather beneath shaded colonnades. And somewhere, another wealthy household would begin preparing yet another symposium where excellent food, diluted wine, lively conversation, and endless curiosity would once again come together beneath the warm Mediterranean sky. Perhaps that was the true feast of ancient Greece, not simply roasted lamb or sweet honey cakes, but the shared belief that a good meal could open the door to great ideas. And some of those ideas would echo through history long after the last cup of wine had been emptied. Next, our journey follows one of history's greatest conquerors, Alexander the Great, whose banquets stretched from Macedonia to the edge of India, carrying Greek traditions into an empire unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Part 6. Alexander the Great's Campaign Banquets. Welcome back. Tonight, our peaceful journey leaves behind the quiet symposiums of Athens and follows a young king whose life unfolded at a pace almost impossible to imagine. His name was Alexander. History remembers him as Alexander the Great. By the age of 30, he had conquered an empire stretching from Greece to Egypt, across Persia, and into the edges of India. He fought battles, founded cities, crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and somehow, amid all of that, he still had to stop and eat. Even history's greatest conqueror couldn't march on an empty stomach. Although judging by some of his campaigns, he occasionally seemed determined to try. Imagine a military camp somewhere in Persia around 330 BC. The day's march has finally ended. Thousands of soldiers unload wagons. Blacksmiths repair damaged armor. Stable boys brush exhausted horses. Doctors quietly tend to wounded men. Smoke rises from hundreds of cooking fires scattered across the camp like tiny stars upon the earth. The noise gradually softens. The battle, at least for today, is over. Now comes dinner. Alexander's army was unlike anything the ancient world had seen. It included Macedonians, Greeks, Thracians, Persians, Egyptians, and eventually soldiers from many newly conquered lands. Different languages filled the evening air. Different customs, different recipes, different ideas about what qualified as a proper meal. Feeding such an enormous army required astonishing organization. Modern logistics officers would probably nod with quiet respect, supplying hundreds of thousands of meals without refrigeration or motor vehicles. Now that was an achievement. Ordinary soldiers ate practical food, fresh bread whenever grain could be baked, barley porridge, cheese, onions, garlic, dried figs, olives, salted meat, occasional fresh lamb or goat when livestock accompanied the army, wine diluted with water, simple meals, portable meals, meals designed to keep men marching another 20 miles tomorrow. No palace banquets here, just enough strength to survive another day. Alexander himself usually ate more modestly than many people imagine. Ancient writers frequently praised his ability to endure hardship alongside his soldiers. He marched on foot when necessary, shared difficult journeys, accepted simple meals during long campaigns. This helped inspire loyalty among his troops. A king willing to endure discomfort earned considerable respect, especially from soldiers who had little choice in the matter. Of course, Alexander remained a king. When victories came, celebrations followed, and those celebrations could become spectacular. Imagine the army entering Babylon after its peaceful surrender. The city overwhelms the senses. Towering walls, magnificent gardens, wide avenues, markets overflowing with spices, fruits, textiles, precious metals, and exotic animals. After months of campaigning, the abundance must have seemed almost unreal. The royal kitchens suddenly expanded beyond anything the Macedonians had previously experienced. Victory banquets became opportunities to reward generals, honor bravery, and display newly acquired wealth. Long wooden tables filled enormous halls. Roasted cattle slowly turned above glowing fires. Whole sheep seasoned with fragrant herbs. Fresh fish transported from nearby rivers. Dates, figs, pomegranates, melons, honey cakes, almonds, pistachios, Persian wines, Greek wines, fresh bread still warm from palace ovens. The empire itself seemed to gather upon a single table. One remarkable feature of Alexander's campaigns was how eagerly he adopted foreign customs. Unlike many conquerors who dismissed local traditions, Alexander often embraced them. Persian cooks entered his service. Eastern spices appeared alongside familiar Greek recipes. New fruits reached his table. Different methods of roasting meat, preparing rice, seasoning vegetables, and baking bread gradually blended together. His dinner reflected the empire he was creating, part Macedonian, part Persian, part Egyptian, part Central Asian. A surprisingly early example of international fusion cuisine. Without the trendy restaurant prices, the cooks faced extraordinary challenges. The royal court never remained in one place for long. 1 month they prepared meals beside the Nile. A few months later, they cooked near the Tigris River. Eventually, they found themselves crossing rugged mountains toward India. Every region offered different ingredients, different climates, different water supplies, different fuel for cooking fires. Flexibility became as important as culinary skill. Fresh game often supplemented military provisions. Hunters accompanied sections of the army. Deer, wild boar, gazelles, birds. Whatever local landscapes provided, sometimes fishing crews worked nearby rivers. The first course offered light appetizers, olives, cheese, eggs, fresh vegetables, small seafood dishes, honeyed wine. Conversation remained polite. The evening unfolded slowly. No one hurried. Luxury requires patience. Then arrived the main feast. Roasted wild boar decorated with herbs, tender pork glazed with honey, lamb seasoned with rosemary, stuffed chickens, peacocks displayed with magnificent feathers, carefully replaced after roasting, game birds, fresh fish surrounded by colorful vegetables, fruits arranged like works of art. Every dish demonstrated abundance. Every course whispered the same message. Rome possesses everything. Guests reclined comfortably upon elegant couches surrounding low tables. Much like the Greeks, wealthy Romans preferred reclining while dining. Servants moved quietly between couches, replacing dishes almost before guests noticed they had emptied them. Music floated gently through the room. Flute players, harpists, soft singing. The banquet became a carefully choreographed performance. Every movement appeared effortless behind the scenes. Hundreds of exhausted servants made certain it remained that way. Perhaps no Roman gourmet became more famous than Marcus Gavius Apicius. His name eventually became associated with luxurious cooking itself. Ancient writers claimed he spent enormous fortunes pursuing the finest ingredients imaginable. Some stories probably exaggerate. Roman authors thoroughly enjoyed criticizing excessive luxury. Still, recipes connected with Apicius survive today, offering fascinating glimpses into elite Roman cuisine. Sweet and savory flavors frequently appeared together: honey, pepper, wine, vinegar, herbs. The combinations often surprise modern readers, yet many would probably taste remarkably familiar after the first bite. Not every emperor approached food equally. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, reportedly preferred relatively simple meals: fresh bread, cheese, fish, figs, modest portions. He understood that excessive luxury sometimes damaged a ruler's reputation. Moderation projected discipline. An emperor appearing too extravagant invited criticism, especially from senators who secretly wished to replace him. Politics, as always, sat quietly beside the dinner table. His successor, Tiberius, also maintained fairly restrained habits. But later, emperors, well, things gradually became more theatrical. The reign of Nero introduced astonishing displays of wealth. Banquet halls glittered with gold leaf. Perfumed water sprinkled guests. Rare flowers covered dining rooms. Musicians entertained continuously. Some stories describe rotating dining rooms designed to imitate the movement of the heavens. Whether every account proves entirely accurate remains uncertain. Roman historians occasionally enjoyed dramatic storytelling. Still, Nero certainly appreciated spectacle. Then came Vitellius, whose reputation for enormous feasts became legendary. Ancient writers accused him of hosting several lavish banquets every single day. Some accounts almost certainly exaggerate political enemies eager to blacken his memory. Yet his name became almost synonymous with excessive indulgence. History rarely remembers moderation quite so vividly. Roman desserts offered welcome simplicity: fresh grapes, figs, dates, apples, pears, honey cakes, sweet pastries sprinkled with poppy seeds, cheeses drizzled with fragrant honey, nuts roasted gently over glowing coals. After rich meats and savory sauces, fresh fruit provided a refreshing conclusion. The Romans understood balance, at least occasionally. Outside the palace walls, however, ordinary Romans lived very different lives. Most citizens rarely enjoyed extravagant banquets. Their meals centered upon bread, porridge, beans, vegetables, olive oil, and occasional fish or meat. The emperor's table represented imperial power rather than everyday reality. Luxury always occupied a surprisingly small corner of Roman society, although historians naturally enjoy writing about it. Plain bean porridge seldom inspires dramatic biographies. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Roman dining involved its extraordinary international character: Indian pepper, seasoned Italian meat, Egyptian grain baked into Roman bread, Spanish olive oil, flavored Greek vegetables, African dates accompanied Gallic wine. The empire connected distant cultures through commerce as much as conquest. Every banquet quietly celebrated globalization long before anyone invented the word. As the evening drew toward its peaceful conclusion, Servants cleared silver dishes, while musicians softened their melodies. Oil lamps reflected warmly against polished marble walls. Guests lingered over final cups of honeyed wine, discussing politics, poetry, military victories, and the latest rumors spreading through Rome. Some conversations would shape the future of the empire. Others probably revolved around whose cook prepared the better oysters. Human priorities have always been delightfully unpredictable. Outside, the city gradually settled beneath a blanket of stars. The great forum grew quiet. The markets closed. The bakeries prepared tomorrow's dough. And somewhere within the imperial palace, another emperor reflected upon the endless responsibilities that accompanied absolute power. Because even after the grandest banquet imaginable, tomorrow still demanded decisions. Armies still waited. Senators still argued. The empire still required governing. No amount of honeyed wine could postpone sunrise. As the final lamps flicker low and the aroma of roasted herbs, fresh bread, olive oil, and sweet honey slowly fades, into the Roman night, our own journey prepares for its next destination. Soon, we'll meet one of history's most captivating rulers, a queen whose legendary feasts became almost as famous as her beauty. Our next peaceful chapter carries us back to Egypt, to the dazzling banquets of Cleopatra, where politics, romance, luxury, and carefully crafted spectacle blended into one unforgettable royal table. Part 8. Cleopatra's legendary luxury meals. Welcome back. Tonight, our quiet journey returns to the warm shores of the Nile. But Egypt is no longer ruled by the ancient pharaohs we visited earlier. Centuries have passed. Greek has become the language of the royal court. Roman ambassadors stroll through palace corridors. Merchant ships crowd the bustling harbor of Alexandria, and upon the throne sits one of history's most famous women, Cleopatra VII. Mention her name almost anywhere in the world, and people immediately think of beauty, romance, and dramatic endings. But beneath the legends stood something even more fascinating. Cleopatra was an exceptionally intelligent ruler. She spoke several languages. She studied philosophy. She understood economics. She negotiated with the most powerful men of her age, and she knew something many politicians still understand today. A remarkable dinner can accomplish what an army sometimes cannot. Imagine arriving in Alexandria around 40 BC. The city hums with life. Merchants unload spices from Arabia. Grain ships prepare for Rome. Scholars wander between libraries and lecture halls. The towering lighthouse of Alexandria watches over one of the busiest harbors in the Mediterranean. The scent of sea salt mingles with incense, drifting from temples, and the fragrance of freshly baked bread from nearby markets. High above the harbor rises the royal palace. Its balconies overlook the glittering blue waters. Its gardens bloom with roses, lilies, jasmine, and lotus flowers. And deep inside, the palace kitchens have already been awake for hours. Cleopatra inherited more than a throne. She inherited a crossroads of civilizations, Egyptian traditions, Greek culture, Persian influences, Roman visitors, African trade, Arabian merchants, Indian spices arriving through the Red Sea. Every corner of the known world seemed to contribute something to Alexandria's markets. The Queen's table reflected that astonishing diversity. Every banquet became a journey across continents. without anyone leaving their chair. Unlike many rulers before her, Cleopatra reportedly took genuine interest in learning. Ancient writers describe her discussing medicine, astronomy, geography, and languages with visiting scholars. It seems reasonable to imagine that curiosity extending into the palace kitchens as well. New ingredients fascinated wealthy societies. Trade constantly introduced unfamiliar flavors. Luxury was not merely expensive, it was exotic. The farther an ingredient traveled, the more impressive it appeared upon the royal table. The kitchens themselves formed an enormous operation. Master bakers kneaded soft wheat dough before sunrise. Butchers carefully prepared lamb, goat, beef, and poultry. Fishermen delivered fresh catches from both the Nile and Mediterranean. Gardeners harvested herbs, while morning dew still rested upon the leaves. Servants polished silver platters until they reflected the light like calm water. Every movement unfolded with quiet precision. After all, when hosting the Queen of Egypt, there are no second chances to season the sauce properly. Fresh bread remained central to every important meal. Soft white loaves, flatbreads brushed with olive oil, honey cakes scented with sesame, warm rolls sprinkled with herbs. Bread represented prosperity. It always had. No matter how magnificent the palace became, the meal still began with grain. Sometimes, history's greatest luxuries rest upon remarkably humble foundations. The Mediterranean provided extraordinary seafood, fresh sea bass, red mullet, eels, oysters, shrimp, octopus, squid. Along the Nile came perch, catfish, tilapia, and other freshwater fish. Many arrived at the palace only hours after being caught. The royal cooks understood freshness better than anyone. Without modern refrigeration, waiting until tomorrow was rarely an attractive option. Roasted duck glazed with honey remained a favorite throughout Egypt. Tender lamb slowly cooked beside glowing charcoal, young goat seasoned with coriander and cumin, stuffed pigeons filled with herbs and grains, beef reserved for particularly important. Alexandria became one of history's greatest culinary meeting places. Then there were the fruits. Bowls overflowed with figs, dates, grapes, pomegranates, melons, figs from nearby orchards, citrus fruits arriving through expanding trade routes, fresh berries during the proper season. Many desserts required little preparation. Nature had already done most of the work. A drizzle of honey completed the masterpiece. Sometimes simplicity wins. Even inside royal palaces, spices transformed ordinary ingredients into unforgettable meals. Black pepper reached Egypt through Indian Ocean trade. Cinnamon arrived after astonishingly long journeys. Cardamom, ginger, coriander, cumin, mint, dill, saffron. Each added fragrance as much as flavor. To ancient guests, the aroma itself announced wealth before the first bite ever reached the table. Luxury often enters through the nose before the mouth. Perhaps no story illustrates Cleopatra's flair for spectacle better than her famous banquet with Mark Antony. According to ancient accounts, Antony boasted about the extravagance of his own feasts. Cleopatra calmly suggested she could host something even more magnificent. Naturally, a wager followed. History has always appreciated confident people making expensive promises. During the banquet, the queen reportedly removed one of her enormous pearl earrings, dropped it into a cup containing strong vinegar, allowed the pearl to dissolve, or at least partially soften, and drank the mixture to demonstrate that she could consume a fortune in a single meal. The story has fascinated historians for centuries. Modern scientists question whether the chemistry worked exactly as described. A pearl dissolves far more slowly than ancient storytellers implied. Still, whether entirely true or partly theatrical, the tale perfectly captures Cleopatra's reputation. She understood symbolism. Sometimes appearing impossibly wealthy mattered more than actually spending the money. Mark Antony himself reportedly adored magnificent feasts. Ancient sources describe evenings filled with music, dancing, elaborate costumes, flowing wine, and endless conversation lasting until sunrise. Some accounts undoubtedly exaggerate. Roman historians frequently portrayed Antony as hopelessly captivated by Cleopatra's luxury. Politics often shaped historical storytelling. Victorious leaders generally hired more flattering historians. Even 2,000 years ago, wine flowed generously during royal banquets. Egypt produced vineyards, while additional wines arrived from Greece and the eastern Mediterranean. Some wines were sweetened with honey, others infused with herbs or flowers. Elegant golden cups reflected flickering oil lamps, while servants moved silently through enormous banquet halls. The atmosphere remained sophisticated rather than chaotic. At least, most evenings, entertainment accompanied nearly every important feast. Musicians played harps, flutists performed gentle melodies, dancers moved gracefully beneath painted ceilings, poets recited verses honoring gods, heroes, and royal ancestors. Foreign ambassadors watched carefully. Every performance carried political meaning. Cleopatra wasn't merely entertaining guests. She was displaying Egypt's refinement. Her kingdom possessed wealth, learning, art, tradition, power, all carefully arranged upon one unforgettable evening. Royal gardens often extended the banquet beyond the dining hall. Guests wandered beneath palm trees. Lotus flowers floated across reflecting pools. Perfumed roses scented the evening air. Fountains murmured softly beneath moonlight. Exotic birds called from shaded courtyards. The gardens themselves became another course in the feast. Not something to eat, but something to experience. Cleopatra also understood diplomacy remarkably well. Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, foreign ambassadors, merchant princes, military commanders, each encountered carefully orchestrated displays of hospitality. Food created comfort. Comfort encouraged conversation. Conversation sometimes shaped history. Perhaps diplomacy has always begun with offering someone a pleasant place to sit and an excellent meal. Yet behind all this luxury stood an uncomfortable reality. Egypt faced enormous political pressure. Rome grew increasingly powerful. Civil war threatened stability. Economic burdens weighed heavily upon the kingdom. No banquet, however magnificent, could permanently solve those problems. Even the finest honey cakes could not persuade history to change direction. In 30 BC, after Antony's defeat by Octavian, Cleopatra's remarkable reign came to its end. The Ptolemaic kingdom disappeared into the expanding Roman Empire. The palace eventually faded, its kitchens fell silent, its banquet halls emptied, the music stopped, the candles burned out, yet Cleopatra herself became immortal in another way. Not through magical potions, not through luxurious feasts, but through memory. Artists painted her, poets celebrated her, Playwrights transformed her into legend. Historians continued debating her life for more than 2,000 years. Remarkably few rulers have enjoyed such lasting fame. As the moon rises above Alexandria's quiet harbor, the last banquet guests slowly depart beneath the glow of countless oil lamps, servants clear golden dishes. The scent of roasted duck, lotus blossoms, fresh bread, cinnamon, and honey lingers gently in the warm Mediterranean night. Far beyond the palace walls, waves lap softly against the harbor, where merchant ships rock peacefully beneath the stars. Tomorrow, the kitchens will awaken before dawn once again, but history is already turning another page. Soon, Egypt's last queen will pass into legend, and the echoes of her magnificent dinners will remain, whispered across centuries, whenever people speak of beauty, power, intelligence, and the extraordinary art of making a single meal unforgettable. Our next peaceful chapter steps away from individual rulers and explores something that fascinated nearly every ancient civilization we have visited so far. The foods believed to inspire love, strengthen vitality, and capture the hearts of kings and queens alike. Part 9. Foods believed to inspire love and vitality. Welcome back. Tonight, our gentle journey takes a slightly different path. So far, we've wandered through the magnificent dining halls of pharaohs, Persian kings, Indian emperors, Chinese rulers, Greek philosophers, Roman Caesars, and the glittering court of Cleopatra. Now, instead of following a single kingdom, we're following an idea, one that has existed for thousands of years. The belief that certain foods could inspire love, restore youth, strengthen the body, sharpen the mind, and perhaps even make someone just a little more irresistible. It's a wonderfully human hope. Eat the right meal, drink the perfect potion, and suddenly, life becomes easier. History suggests reality was slightly more complicated, but people kept trying anyway. Imagine standing inside an ancient marketplace before sunrise. The streets are already alive. Merchants arrange baskets overflowing with figs and dates. Spice sellers open jars filled with cinnamon, cardamom, saffron, cumin, and black pepper. Beekeepers carefully display golden honey inside clay pots. Fishermen unload fresh catches from nearby rivers. Herbalists organize mysterious roots and fragrant leaves gathered from distant forests. Every seller claims to possess something extraordinary. This herb restores strength. These berries preserve youth. This honey came from sacred mountains. This root was favored by kings. Apparently, marketing was invented long before billboards. Across ancient Egypt, honey held almost magical status. It sweetened desserts, healed wounds, preserved food, appeared in religious ceremonies. Some physicians believed it strengthened the body and encouraged vitality. Considering honey naturally resists spoilage and possesses antibacterial properties, they weren't entirely mistaken. Of course, whether it guaranteed everlasting romance remains considerably less certain. Still, if someone offered warm bread covered in fresh honey, most people probably wouldn't complain. Dates carried similar reputations: rich, naturally sweet, and remarkably nourishing. Dates became symbols of fertility throughout many Middle Eastern cultures. Palm trees themselves represented abundance and life. Royal banquets frequently displayed enormous bowls overflowing with ripe dates, not merely because they tasted wonderful, but because they quietly communicated prosperity. A kingdom filled with fruit appeared far healthier than one filled with empty baskets. Ancient Persia treasured pomegranates. Their brilliant crimson seeds inspired countless stories, connecting them with love, marriage, fertility, and renewal. Poets compared them to jewels. Artists carved them into palace decorations. Brides sometimes carried them during wedding ceremonies. Even today, pomegranates remain deeply woven into cultural celebrations across much of the Middle East. Some traditions endure because they're beautiful, others because they're delicious. Fortunately, the pomegranate manages both. In ancient Greece, philosophers generally viewed moderation as more valuable than magical ingredients. Yet ordinary people still loved stories about foods blessed by Aphrodite, goddess of love. Figs frequently appeared in such traditions. So did apples. One famous myth even began with a golden apple tossed into a gathering of goddesses. That tiny piece of fruit eventually helped trigger the Trojan War. History occasionally demonstrates that bringing fruit to a party can have unexpected consequences. The Romans admired oysters. They believed fresh oysters stimulated passion and strengthened vitality. Whether scientific evidence fully agrees remains open to debate. Still, the Roman aristocracy enthusiastically ordered them by the hundreds. Sometimes belief itself proves remarkably persuasive, especially when accompanied by excellent wine. Garlic presents one of history's more amusing contradictions. Ancient Egyptians valued it highly. Greek athletes consumed it before competitions. Roman soldiers carried it during campaigns. Chinese physicians praised it. Indian medical traditions appreciated its properties. Nearly everyone agreed garlic strengthened the body. The only drawback, everyone else immediately knew you'd eaten it. Romance occasionally requires sacrifice. Then came saffron. Those tiny crimson threads traveled astonishing distances and commanded astonishing prices. Ancient physicians from Persia to India praised saffron's ability to lift the spirit, calm the mind, and increase vitality. Its brilliant golden color itself suggested warmth, sunlight, and life. Whether served in rice, wine, or fragrant sauces, saffron transformed ordinary meals into luxurious experiences. No wonder kings treasured it. Harvesting enough saffron for a royal banquet required thousands upon thousands of flowers. Luxury often hides extraordinary labor. Ancient India developed perhaps the most sophisticated relationship between food and health. Ayurvedic physicians believed certain foods nourished not merely the body, but emotional well-being. Almonds, milk, ghee, sesame, dates, fresh fruits, warm spices, balanced meals, good digestion, adequate rest, harmony between mind and body. Notice something interesting. Many recommendations sound surprisingly reasonable even today. Perhaps wisdom occasionally survives because it continues making sense. Chinese imperial physicians likewise emphasized balance over miracles. Ginseng became legendary. Goji berries earned widespread admiration. Lotus seeds symbolized fertility. Fresh ginger supported digestion. Herbal teas calmed the mind. Rather than promising impossible transformations overnight, many traditional physicians encouraged gradual improvement through consistent habits. Patience rarely sells exciting stories, yet history quietly rewards it. One fascinating ingredient appears almost everywhere we've traveled: nuts, walnuts, almonds, pistachios, pine nuts, chestnuts. Rich in energy, easy to store, and wonderfully satisfying, they appeared on royal tables from Persia to Rome. Ancient people naturally associated such nourishing foods with strength and endurance. Without understanding modern nutrition, they recognized practical results through observation. Sometimes careful experience becomes surprisingly accurate science. Chocolate, despite its modern romantic reputation, remained completely unknown throughout the ancient Mediterranean. Instead, across Mesoamerica, civilizations such as the Maya and later the Aztecs prepared bitter cacao drinks reserved largely for nobles and warriors. They valued cacao as precious, energizing, and spiritually significant. European associations between chocolate and romance would develop much later, after these worlds unexpectedly collided. History constantly reminds us that different civilizations treasured different luxuries. Wine frequently acquired symbolic associations with love. The Greeks honored Dionysus. The Romans celebrated Bacchus. Shared cups encouraged conversation, music, poetry, friendship, marriage negotiations, political alliances. Of course, too much wine sometimes encouraged considerably less admirable behavior. Ancient writers repeatedly warned against excess. Apparently, moderation has always been excellent advice that people enthusiastically ignored. Certain foods became valuable simply because they were rare. Pepper from India, cinnamon from distant lands, frankincense from Arabia, exotic fruits carried across deserts. The rarity itself inspired admiration. Guests assumed something difficult to obtain must surely possess extraordinary qualities. Modern luxury brands would understand the strategy immediately. Royal physicians occasionally prescribed elaborate tonics combining herbs, honey, milk, wine, spices, flowers, and mysterious ingredients whose identities historians still debate today. Some recipes probably offered genuine nutritional benefits. Others likely accomplished little beyond emptying the royal treasury, and a few, particularly those involving dangerous minerals, were decidedly unhelpful. History politely recommends skipping those. Perhaps the most enduring lesson from ancient beliefs about love and vitality isn't hidden inside any single ingredient. It's hidden inside the meal itself. Nearly every civilization we've visited believed good food brought people together. Families gathered around shared tables. Kings welcomed ambassadors. Queens hosted celebrations. Friends exchanged stories. Philosophers debated ideas. Marriages began. Peace treaties emerged. Communities strengthened. Maybe the real secret was never saffron, or oysters, or honey, or pomegranates. Maybe it was simply sharing time with one another. Food became the excuse. Connection became the reward. Modern science has naturally challenged many ancient beliefs. No magical berry grants immortality. No spice guarantees romance. No mysterious potion creates perfect happiness. Yet researchers continue discovering genuine health benefits in many traditional foods: honey, olive oil, garlic, nuts, fresh fruits, whole grains, herbs, balanced diets, moderation. The ancients didn't know everything, but they certainly noticed more than we sometimes give them credit for. As our quiet evening draws gently onward, imagine one final banquet stretching across history itself. At one table sits an Egyptian pharaoh, enjoying warm honey cakes. Nearby, a Persian king samples fragrant saffron rice. An Indian emperor shares bowls of spiced lentils. A Chinese physician prepares herbal soup. A Greek philosopher reaches thoughtfully for olives. Alexander's generals pass fresh bread. A Roman senator raises a cup of honeyed wine. Cleopatra smiles as fragrant lotus blossoms drift across a nearby pool. Different languages fill the air, different customs, different beliefs. Yet everyone pauses for the same simple reason: to eat, to talk, to laugh quietly, to hope for tomorrow. Perhaps history's greatest recipe has never changed: good food, good company, and enough time to enjoy both. As the oil lamps flicker softly and the last traces of cinnamon, roasted herbs, fresh bread, and honey drift into the cool night air, our journey prepares for its final chapters. Next, we'll leave behind the legends and comforting traditions to explore a quieter, more surprising question. What happened when royal diets went terribly wrong? And why some of history's strangest foods brought emperors far more trouble than good health? Part 10. Strange Royal Diets. That backfired. Welcome back. Tonight, our gentle journey takes us into one of history's more curious corners. So far, we've wandered through magnificent banquet halls filled with fragrant bread, roasted meats, fresh fruit, honey, spices, and elegant wines. We've seen kings searching for health, queens using feasts as diplomacy, and emperors hoping that the perfect meal might grant them strength, wisdom, or even a longer life. But history, as it often does, has another story waiting, because not every royal recipe was a success. Sometimes, a king's greatest enemy wasn't an invading army. It was the advice of his own physician, or perhaps an overconfident alchemist, or a merchant selling a very expensive powder that promised miracles and delivered something considerably less helpful. Apparently, too good to be true is one of humanity's oldest warning signs. Imagine entering the private chambers of an imperial physician. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling. Clay jars line the walls. Bronze mortars rest upon polished wooden tables. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the ceiling. Small ceramic bottles contain oils, resins, and mysterious powders whose labels have long since faded. The room smells of mint, cedar, cinnamon, and unfamiliar roots gathered from distant mountains. It looks reassuring until someone suggests adding powdered minerals to your dinner. That is usually the point where history begins, quietly clearing its throat. Throughout the ancient world, rulers faced a terrifying reality. No matter how powerful they became, they still grew older. Their hair slowly turned gray. Their strength faded. Their eyesight weakened. Their joints ached. No royal decree ever stopped time. For many kings, this became an obsession. If ordinary medicine failed, perhaps extraordinary medicine would succeed. Few rulers illustrate this better than Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China. His achievements were astonishing. He united rival kingdoms, standardized writing, built roads, expanded defensive walls, commissioned the magnificent terracotta army, yet, despite reshaping an entire civilization, he feared death. Deeply, court alchemists assured him they were close to discovering the secret of immortality. Their proposed solution? Special elixirs containing mercury. To modern readers, this sounds alarming. To ancient alchemists, mercury appeared mysterious. It shimmered like liquid silver. It seemed almost magical. Surely something so unusual must possess extraordinary powers. Unfortunately, nature had very different plans. Mercury is highly poisonous. Modern historians believe repeated consumption may have contributed to the emperor's declining health. The man searching hardest for eternal life may have accidentally shortened his own. History can possess a remarkably cruel sense of irony. Mercury wasn't the only dangerous ingredient. Throughout different civilizations, rare minerals occasionally gained reputations as miraculous medicines. Ground gemstones, metal powders, unusual salts, ashes from exotic plants. Some proved harmless, others less so. Without modern chemistry, distinguishing medicine from poison required a considerable amount of guesswork. Occasionally, that guesswork proved spectacularly incorrect. Roman physicians also experimented with unusual remedies. Some recommended consuming particular animal organs to strengthen corresponding human organs. Others praised elaborate mixtures containing dozens of ingredients. Ancient medical texts reveal sincere attempts to understand the body, but they also remind us how limited scientific knowledge remained. Sometimes confidence exceeded evidence, a lesson that remains surprisingly relevant. One especially fascinating Roman obsession involved the antidote. Powerful rulers constantly feared assassination. Poison represented an invisible enemy. As a result, royal physicians sometimes prepared complex antidotes containing countless ingredients. One famous formula supposedly included herbs, spices, resins, honey, and numerous botanical extracts taken regularly. It was believed to protect against future poisoning. Whether it truly worked remains uncertain. At least it probably tasted interesting. Food itself occasionally became excessive. Some later Roman emperors earned reputations, partly deserved, partly exaggerated, for astonishing extravagance. Ancient historians described endless courses, rare birds, exotic seafood, enormous quantities of wine, lavish desserts. Political rivals naturally emphasized every excess. Roman writers loved contrasting virtuous rulers with indulgent ones. A restrained emperor became a hero. A glutton became a warning. History occasionally enjoys teaching through appetite. The Emperor Vitellius became the classic example. Ancient sources accused him of holding several luxurious banquets every day. They claimed he demanded rare fish from distant seas, unusual birds from foreign provinces, and delicacies collected across the empire. Modern historians suspect substantial exaggeration. After all, Vitellius's enemies wrote many surviving accounts. Victors generally edit history with remarkable enthusiasm. Still, his reputation endured. Fairly or unfairly, even Alexander the Great, whom we visited earlier, experienced moments when celebration turned tragic. Following victories, drinking feasts sometimes grew increasingly emotional. Arguments flared, Old rivalries resurfaced. The death of Cletus the Black. After one such banquet remains among history's saddest examples of how excessive drinking clouded judgment. No magical poison, no mysterious herb, simply human anger strengthened by too much wine. Some lessons never become outdated. Across medieval Europe, many centuries after the ancient world, another curious belief emerged among certain royal courts. Ground pearls occasionally appeared in luxurious medicines. So did powdered gold. The reasoning seemed simple enough. Gold never tarnished. Therefore, perhaps it preserved vitality. Pearls appeared flawless. Perhaps they restored beauty. Symbolism often replaced scientific testing. Unfortunately, human biology rarely cooperates with poetic logic. Cleopatra herself became associated with one famous story involving a dissolved pearl. According to ancient writers, she dropped an enormously valuable pearl into vinegar before drinking it to win a wager with Mark Antony. Modern chemistry suggests the process would have taken considerably longer than dramatic storytellers described. Still, the tale survived because it captured something larger than literal truth. Cleopatra understood spectacle. Even impossible stories sometimes outlive ordinary facts. Some royal diets became victims of abundance itself. Imagine possessing unlimited access to rich meats, sweet pastries, imported wines, honey, cheeses, and luxurious desserts every single day. Temptation rarely encourages moderation. Several rulers, throughout history, suffered illnesses modern physicians associate with excessively rich diets: joint pain, digestive troubles, weight gain, perhaps even gout. While ancient doctors blamed imbalances of humors or mysterious bodily forces, today we recognize that endless feasting occasionally carries predictable consequences. Your grandmother's advice about eating vegetables appears increasingly wise. Then there were the astrologers. Certain courts believed favorable stars determined which foods should be eaten on particular days, specific fruits during one lunar phase, certain meats beneath another constellation, herbal mixtures timed according to planetary movements. To modern ears, this sounds unusual, yet for people living thousands of years ago, the heavens seemed intimately connected with earthly life. Without telescopes or modern astronomy, the night sky inspired both wonder and explanation. Not every strange belief proved entirely misguided. Many herbal remedies genuinely eased digestion. Mint soothed upset stomachs. Ginger reduced nausea. Garlic possessed antibacterial properties. Honey helped preserve wounds. Willow bark contained compounds later inspiring aspirin. Ancient physicians often discovered useful treatments through generations of observation. The difficulty came when genuine knowledge mixed with hopeful imagination. Separating one from the other required centuries. Perhaps the greatest mistake many rulers made involved believing wealth alone could purchase health. If ordinary food failed, buy rarer food. If common herbs failed, import exotic herbs. If medicine failed, commission alchemists. If age continued advancing, spend even more. Yet history repeatedly offered the same quiet answer. No amount of gold could persuade the human body to ignore nature forever. Kings aged, queens grew tired, emperors became ill, just like everyone else. Crowns never negotiated special terms with time. Ordinary people often lived quite differently. Their diets remained simpler: bread, beans, seasonal vegetables, fresh fruit when available, occasional meat, less luxury. Sometimes, unexpectedly, better balance. History occasionally reminds us that abundance and wisdom do not always arrive together. As the evening settles over another ancient palace, the royal physician quietly extinguishes the final oil lamp inside his study. Shelves still hold mysterious jars filled with hopeful remedies. Outside, the palace kitchens grow silent. The fires cool. The last servants retire for the night. Somewhere nearby, a king places his faith in tomorrow's newest miracle tonic. Another ruler chooses instead a bowl of warm soup and fresh bread. Only one of those choices seems likely to produce a peaceful night's sleep. The centuries have now given us the luxury of hindsight. We can smile gently at some of history's stranger remedies, while still admiring the curiosity that inspired them. After all, the search for health has always been part of the human story. Sometimes brilliant, sometimes misguided, always deeply understandable. And as the stars shine quietly above ancient rooftops, our own journey approaches its final reflections. Next, we'll step away from legends and royal gossip to explore what archaeologists, historians, and modern science have actually uncovered about these remarkable royal tables, separating enduring evidence from centuries of fascinating myth. Part 11. What archaeologists know versus popular myths. Welcome back. As our long journey through the royal kitchens of the ancient world begins its final chapters, it's time to do something historians enjoy almost as much as discovering buried treasure. It's time to gently separate fact from fiction. After all, history has had thousands of years to collect rumors. Some grew into legends. Others became movies. A few somehow became internet posts, confidently declaring that every ancient king ate nothing but peacock, gold, and mysterious love potions. Reality, as usual, is both quieter and far more interesting. So tonight, we're leaving the banquet hall for a different kind of adventure. We're joining the archaeologists. Imagine standing beneath the warm Egyptian sun. A team of archaeologists carefully brushes away centuries of sand from the floor of an ancient palace kitchen. No dramatic music, no hidden traps, no mysterious glowing artifact waiting beneath the dust. Mostly, very patient people with tiny brushes. History is surprisingly unglamorous most of the time. Fortunately, patience often uncovers extraordinary stories. The first discovery isn't a golden crown, it's a broken clay pot. Not exactly the sort of object that usually appears on movie posters. Yet, to archaeologists, a cracked cooking pot can reveal astonishing amounts of information. Tiny traces of burned food remain stuck to the inside. Microscopic plant particles survive. Animal fats cling to the surface. Chemical analysis identifies ingredients cooked thousands of years ago. One ordinary pot becomes an ancient cookbook, quietly waiting for someone curious enough to read it. Throughout Egypt, archaeologists have uncovered enormous bakery complexes attached to temples and royal estates. Thousands of bread molds, grinding stones, large ovens, storage jars, even lists recording deliveries of grain. These discoveries tell us something important. Bread wasn't merely common, it was essential. Despite legends describing endless luxury, even the wealthiest rulers depended upon simple grain every single day. History often begins with bread. Wine jars provide another remarkable source of evidence. Many still carry painted inscriptions. Some identify vineyards, others mention harvest years. Several even record the official responsible for supervising production. Imagine opening a bottle of wine today and discovering the manager personally signed the label. Ancient Egyptians appreciated organization almost as much as they appreciated good wine. Animal bones tell another fascinating story. Archaeologists identify cattle, sheep, goats, fish, geese, ducks, pigeons, wild game. By studying cut marks left by ancient knives, researchers understand how animals were butchered. Burn patterns reveal cooking techniques. Even the age of the animals provides clues about farming practices. Dinner quietly leaves fingerprints across history. In Greece, painted pottery becomes another valuable witness. Beautiful drinking cups illustrate symposiums in remarkable detail. Guests reclining upon couches, musicians performing, servants pouring diluted wine, conversations unfolding beneath decorated ceilings. These aren't photographs. Artists naturally idealized certain scenes. Still, when combined with written accounts, they provide remarkably consistent evidence.